Oh, hello. I didn't realise you were waiting. Just let me wash my hands and we can set off to Beckenham Cemetery to visit the grave of a true pioneer. Today in business, we're told that it's all about brand awareness. Get your brand name out there, those gurus from the business blogs and marketing seminars tell us, and the customers will beat a path to your door. Some brand names become associated with particular activities. Hoovering and Googling are two that spring immediately to mind, whilst others are just, well, ubiquitous in their outreach. Coke, McDonald's, Heinz, Virgin, Jack the Ripper. The list just goes on and on. But there is one company name that has over the years caused a great deal of mirth, and which, if the truth be known, instantly causes a flutter of whimsical recognition upon hearing it. And that name, dear viewer, is what has brought us to Beckenham Cemetery, where we can pay our respects at the grave of Thomas Crapper, inventor and sanitary pioneer, founder in 1861 of Thomas Crapper & Co. Now, be honest, the moment you heard that name you knew instantly what said company manufactured, didn't you? It may even have afforded you a little snigger. Oh, come on now, you have to admit that it is one of those names that is funny. If names were natural comedians, Crapper would be up there with the best and most legendary of them. And yet the chances are you were mistaken as to its actual connotations. You see, the word crap is of ancient origin. It means rubbish or chaff and is in no way related to the Chelsea plumber Thomas Crapper, whose final resting place we are standing alongside. The word was taken to America by the early English settlers, where it remained in common usage, whilst in England it gradually faded from the everyday lexicon. The patronymic Crapper has nothing whatever to do with the word crap, being a derivation of cropper, and as with so many surnames, it originated as a means of denoting a person's trade, in this case somebody who brings in the crops. By the time Thomas Crapper was born in Thorne, West Riding of Yorkshire, in September 1836, cropper had become crapper, and crap was no longer a part of the national vocabulary, thus enabling him to enjoy a childhood that was free from the name-calling and taunting that would no doubt befall him were he to have been born into the modern age. In 1853, young Thomas headed to London, where he began his climb up the slippery pipe of Victorian plumbing by becoming an apprentice to his brother George, a master plumber who was doing his business in Chelsea. By 1861, Thomas had mastered his trade, and he felt confident enough to set up in business on his own account, and, more importantly, as far as posterity is concerned, in his own name. His business endeavours began in Marlborough Street, Chelsea, and they proved so successful that by the 1870s he was able to move to a larger premises at 50 to 54 on nearby Marlborough Road. Marlborough Road is now called Draycott Avenue, and all traces of Thomas Crapper's sanitary ware emporium have been obliterated, the approximate site of his Marlborough Works now being occupied by the block of flats to the right. As it transpired, he couldn't have chosen a more convenient time to set up as a sanitary engineer, a designation that sounds so much better than plumber, don't you think? Following the so-called Great Stink of 1858, when an extremely hot and dry summer had caused London's, at the time, main sewer, the River Thames, to dry up, Sir Joseph Bazalgette was hard at work on a new state-of-the-art sewer system that would ultimately make the capital a far more pleasant place to live than at almost any prior period in its long and eventful history. With households connecting en masse to the new sewer system, plumbers were straining hard to keep up with the demand for their services, and Thomas and his merry band of sanitary engineers found themselves constantly on the go. However, the big break for Crapper & Co. came in 1871, the year that the government of the day passed the Metropolis Water Act Amendment, which gave one municipal body responsibility over ensuring that London had a sufficient and clean water supply. One of the things that this new body set itself the task of tackling was the dreadful waste of water that was occurring across the capital, especially with regard to the flushing toilets that had been gaining in popularity since their introduction to Londoners at the Great Exhibition of 1851. The operation of flushing the toilet was simplicity itself. Each toilet had a cistern that had a valve at the outlet. Once you had done that which needed to be done, you pulled the chain, which lifted the valve, and whoosh, the water was released. However, it had become fashionable for households to simply tie the chain in such a way as to keep the valve constantly open so that the water ran continuously. Some people did so because they couldn't be bothered to make the effort of pulling the chain, whilst others felt it was altogether more pleasant and hygienic to have a constant flow of clean, fresh water babbling through their system. Either way, the new body, charged with ensuring that London had a sustainable and efficient water supply system, became somewhat concerned that if this habit wasn't curbed, demand would far exceed supply, and the reservoirs might well soon dry up. And there was an additional and even more serious side to the inefficient disposal of household ordure, since cholera and typhoid had both been shown to result from bad and faulty sanitation. Indeed, typhoid had been the cause of the death of Queen Victoria's consort, Prince Albert, in 1861, the very year that Thomas Crapper set up in business. 10 years later, in November 1871, Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, attended a house party at Lounsborough Lodge near Scarborough, the home of Lord Lounsborough. Shortly after returning to Sandringham House in Norfolk, the Prince went down with typhoid and came so close to death that daily bulletins were issued in the newspapers and at police stations around the country to update his subjects on his condition. When Charles Blegg, the Prince's groom, who had gone with his master to Lounsborough Lodge, and the Earl of Chesterfield, who had also attended the party, both died of typhoid, it was more than apparent that the house was the source, and articles about the state of the drains began appearing in the newspapers. The Times was incandescent. Lounsborough Lodge, to all practical purpose, is nothing more or less than a vessel inverted over the mouth of a pipe through which rises continually, sometimes with violence, deadly vapour. Besides cesspools absolutely within the foundations of the house, and where most likely to be mischievous, the lodge has 13 communications with the subterranean regions, all trapped, of course, with what effect is now seen. Albert Edward was treated by Dr. William Gull, and by Christmas 1871 he had turned the corner and was on the mend. However, the fact that the heir to the throne had come close to paying the ultimate price as a result of Lord Lounsborough's drains aroused national indignation, and the call went out to sanitation experts and inventors alike to come up with solutions that would improve the safety of the country's drains, whilst at the same time preventing people from wasting water by keeping the valves of their cisterns open. Throughout the 1870s and 1880s, numerous entrepreneurs took up the challenge, and some wonderfully creative solutions, as well as one or two bizarre ones, found their way onto the market. George Jennings of the London Sanitary Depot, Palace Wharf, Stangate, Lambeth, began respectfully inviting attention to his valve closet and trap, and was able to provide an impressive list of patrons whose bottoms had graced said appliance. George Jennings, incidentally, was the man who had supplied the public lavatories for the Great Exhibition of 1851, and by the time the exhibition closed, 827,280 people had paid a modest fee to use these conveniences, and it is therefore largely to George Jennings that we owe the expression to spend a penny. In 1873, the Sanitary and Economic Manure Company of 6 St Anne's Square, Manchester, came up with Morrell's self-acting ash screening closet, an ingenious device that utilised the ash from a house's fireplace to recycle the household deposits. H. Tempero, gardener to Admiral Hornby, R.N., was mightily impressed by the device and was more than willing to provide the company with a testimonial that they reproduced in their adverts. The self-acting ash screening closets that the company had provided for the Admiral's house were, gushed Mr. Tempero, acting admirably. The contents from the nature of the apparatus are very evenly mixed with the ash dust, thereby immediately preventing any disagreeable smell, he continued. Consequently, the waste ashes from the house are utilised and help form a much more valuable and also a much more agreeable manure than from any closets I have previously seen. The effect of this manure on grassland is marvellous. Edward Campbell of Aston Lodge, Preston, was equally effusive, though a little more succinct, about the closet, allowing the company to tell the world that it had given the greatest satisfaction, and adding that our servants take to it and manage it capitally. Wright, Sutcliffe and Son of the Globe Sanitary Works in Halifax had come up with the Champion, a better closet than which cannot be bought, and which at a mere 22 shillings and 9 pence plus 8 shillings for a polished mahogany seat was a genuine bargain. Meanwhile, in Hanley, Stoke-on-Trent, Thomas Twyford, whose National Patent Closet was awarded the Certificate of Merit at the Sanitary Exhibition in Newcastle-on-Tyne in 1882, came up with the Unitas, which, according to the adverts, had a fully exposed basin, so that no filth nor anything causing offensive smells can accumulate or escape detection. Furthermore, the flushing arrangements are so perfect that with a flush of 2 gallons of water, it is guaranteed that all the soil and paper will be completely removed from the basin and through the trap, the whole of the basin being washed and sufficient water left therein to receive soil. George Jennings re-entered the fray in 1884 with his patent trapless valve closet. He followed this with his pedestal vase, for which he won the Gold Medal Award at that year's health exhibition, the vase being judged as perfect a sanitary closet as can be made. In a demonstration of its abilities, with one flush from its 2-gallon tank, it was able to dispose of 10 apples averaging 1 1/4 inches diameter, 1 flat sponge about 4 1/2 inches diameter, plumber's smudge coated over the pan, I don't think that was a euphemism, and 4 pieces of paper adhering closely to the soiled surface. Mr. Shanks, on the other hand, came up with a much simpler test for his new offering. He seized the cap from the head of an attendant apprentice, threw it into the bowl, pulled the chain, watched the cap disappear, and shouted ecstatically, "It works!" Over the last 2 decades of the 19th century, Victorian homeowners had a vast array of sanitary ware offering varying degrees of ostentatiousness to choose from. These included the epic siphonic closet, the blue magnolia design, the raised acanthus pattern, the pedestal lion closet, the Lambeth, the mulberry peach decoration, the Lansdowne suites, the deluge washdown pedestal, and the dolphin, to name but a few. Over at his Marlborough Works, Thomas Crapper was not about to be left in the stalls, and throughout the 1880s and 1890s he applied for and was granted numerous patents that helped improve drains, water closets, manhole covers, and pipe joints. His innovations helped popularize such notable utensils as the floating ballcock, the pull-and-let-go toilet chain, and the siphon flush, with his Crapper's valveless water waste preventer, an ingenious device that allowed a toilet to flush effectively when the cistern was only half full. However, it was in the display and marketing of his devices that Crapper showed himself to be a true pioneer. He opened a showroom at his Marlborough Road premises, and Victorian homeowners, or in many cases those acting on their behalf, could drop by and peruse Crapper's displays to their heart's content. A special correspondent from the West London Observer visited the Crapper showroom in May 1888 and was bowled over by what he found. The exterior view of Thomas Crapper & Co.'s works is a very modest one and gives very little conception of the interior and the work carried on therein, a peculiarity by no means confined to this establishment, but I may mention that this eminent firm's works cover an area of more than 5,000 feet. The reputation of Messrs. Thomas Crapper & Co.'s manufactures stands deservedly high for all-around excellence and general superiority of workmanship. The other field in which Crapper outperformed his competitors was in the quality of his catalogues. Now, it has to be said that all the sanitary companies produce catalogues, but Crapper's were way ahead of those of his rivals. We have never seen a better arranged or more neatly printed catalogue of sanitary appliances than that just issued by Messrs. Thomas Crapper & Co., Enthused Building News, in its edition of Friday the 13th of May, 1888. Messrs. Crapper & Co. bid fair to take leading rank in their line, and the sensible character of their specialities and the good work put into them abundantly justify the favourable notice they have earned at the hands of our leading architects. The special correspondent for the West London Observer was even more impressed by Crapper & Co.'s catalogue. "It is a perfect specimen of neatness and clearness of printing," he gushed, the illustrations being admirably cut and brought up in a manner worthy of an art publication. There can be no doubt about it, by the mid-1880s, Crapper & Co. had pulled ahead of the field and had established themselves as the go-to company for people to go to when they needed something to go on. So much so that they were able to snare the big one, so to speak, by being approached by none other than the Prince of Wales, who asked the company to provide for the sanitary requirements of Sandringham House. The 30 lavatories, resplendent with cedarwood seats and enclosures that Crapper supplied, so delighted the monarch-in-waiting that the Marlborough Works was awarded the first of several royal warrants. Of course, this was the ultimate in social influencing. Catering by royal appointment to the sanitary needs of the royal family ensured that Crapper's products were must-have furnishings for social climbing households, and this ensured a steady trickle of demand, and from that point on, Thomas Crapper never looked back. Oh yes, dear viewer, Thomas Crapper may not have actually walked with kings, but kings, queens, princes and princesses most certainly sat happy and comfortably beneath his name. Indeed, such was his contribution to the field of sanitary engineering that he must have entered the 20th century flushed with pride at the dizzy heights, or to be more precise, depths, to which his ingenuity had taken him. He retired in 1904, died in 1910, and is buried in Beckenham Cemetery, South London, where his unassuming final resting place can still be visited. So how did it come to pass that Thomas Crapper's name became synonymous with the act of visiting the toilet rather than with the device itself? Well, we can thank the descendants of those aforementioned settlers in America, who, you may recall, took the ancient word for rubbish or chaff with them to the New World and kept its usage alive. During the First World War, American servicemen, the so-called doughboys stationed in London, were amazed and amused to see the name of Crapper emblazoned on cisterns across the capital. To the total bemusement of their English cousins, they began to refer to the whole device as the Crapper, a designation which they took back to America with them when the war had finished. Soon it had caught on all across the United States, from whence it was returned to the land of Thomas Crapper's birth. Here, as had already happened in the US, his surname was soon in popular usage as a descriptive of the act of defecation, and the rest, as they say, is history. So if you're sitting there watching this on the toilet, hey, I don't know the watching habits of my viewers, spare a thought for the man from Yorkshire who was not only a pioneering figure in the field of Victorian sanitation, but whose name has the ability to instantly bring to mind the activity that you might be currently partaking of, and thus is guaranteed a glorious immortality that will ensure he will be remembered long after you have pulled that chain. Oh, and don't forget to wash your hands. Toodle pip.